All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. The ceiling was so high for Cleveland Browns running back Nick Chubb when this NFL season began. Chubb was on the verge of surpassing Leroy Kelly, the Hall of Fame running back, for second place on the Browns' all time list for rushing yards and possibly helping Cleveland reach the playoffs for the second time in the last 4 years. Chubb also had one more year left on his deal following this season, and he was looking to cash in. And obviously, all of that changed for Chubb when he suffered that horrific leg injury this past Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with that said, you just have to wonder if this young man is going to have the opportunity to play football again at the level that we've been accustomed to seeing him. Now, Chubb's injury, as well as the ankle injury that was sustained by New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley last Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals, has once again put in the spotlight, the injury and the toll that the running backs take physically, as well as the pay disparity among them, among the position rather in the NFL. Now, there's going to be those people who continue to say that the running backs should not be paid more based on the wear and tear of the position as well as the injury possibilities. But how do you expect? And I mean, obviously, Nick Chubb is not going to be there, and he's not going to be there for the rest of the season for the Browns. But with that said, I really feel that this offense is going to look a lot different. I know that they re-signed Kareem Hunt, but my thing is, how do you expect the Browns offense to look without Chubb this Sunday when they take on the Tennessee Titans? And of course, the Browns right now have a struggling quarterback in Deshaun Watson at center. Now, the same can be said for the Giants, who didn't look that hot offensively last night against the San Francisco 49ers without the services of Saquon Barkley. We saw the Minnesota Vikings over the offseason release Pro Bowl running back Dalvin Cook, and obviously, the Vikings have other issues. But with that said, they've begun this season 0-2. And as you know, this was a Vikings team that made the playoffs last year, won the division, and was expected to be in contention once again for the division title. They still can because obviously the season is still early. But my point is, I'm just talking about how some people tend to gloss over the running back position and how important it still is in the game of football. I really don't care how flashy the wide receiver position is, how much money that teams are willing to commit to starting quarterbacks. You still have to run the ball. And obviously, the running back by committee does work for some teams. But regardless if you have that feature back or you're going running back by committee, you've got to be committed to the run game. You look at Chubb, you look at Barkley, you look at Cook, and even Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor, who is hopeful to find a new team, they're part of that small exception of guys who I still consider to be the bell cow or feature backs. And regardless, like I said, regardless if it's them or the running back by committee, you've got to run the football. And I think as this season progresses, we're going to see the value and the importance of Nick Chubb to this Browns offense. Obviously, with that said, we're not guaranteed that Chubb is going to come back and be the same Chubb that he was prior to the injury. The original Surfer Bob, how's it going out there? The way dude's wearing his J's lid reminds me of the great Ryan Howard. Wow, thank you. I appreciate that comment. And I'll tell you like this, just jumping gears real quick to baseball, and for me, and a funny story about it. I've worn my hat to the side just slightly for the most part, probably for the last 20 years or so. And it's just something that stuck with me. And it's one of those things, if I wear it straight or I wear it fully backwards, I just don't feel right. But thanks again. But yeah, with that said, it's one of those where I'm pulling for Chubb to come back, but it's going to be easier said than done. I mean, we've seen some horrific leg injuries in the NFL over the years. Obviously, when people talk about horrific injuries, Joe Theismann is one of the first ones that comes to mind. I think about Napoleon McCallum for the Raiders back in 1994, and I don't think he ever played again after that. And it's going to be tough for Chubb. But the thing is, he's a determined young man and he's going to give it his all. And I'm really pulling for him and hoping that, he gets nothing but the best. This past off season, we saw, running backs united trying to come together because the money just wasn't there for the position. And it's just unfortunate because I put it like this: if somebody has the ability to do something, they can do it. And you think about even in this day and age where teams really don't want to pay running backs. It wasn't that long ago that a guy like Frank Gore or Adrian Peterson were tearing it up. And you, like I said, everybody's not going to be a Frank Gore. Everybody's not going to be an Adrian Peterson. Everybody's not going to be an Emmett Smith. I get that. But at the end of the day, you still have guys that bring value. And in the case of Saquon Barkley, like I talked about over the summer, he's a leader for the Giants. And, the Giants' backup running backs, they don't have the explosiveness running with the ball or receiving the ball that Saquon has. And it's going to be interesting to see now how the Browns are able to go forward without Nick Chubb because he was so vital. And running backs are still important in the game of football. You got to run. I know it's all about the spreads. It's all about the pass game, this, that, and the third, but you got to keep that D off balance and you got to have some physicality. Real quick, you look at the Atlanta Falcons. They used the first round pick this past spring on Bijan Robinson, and the Falcons have won their first two games of the season. I'm not going to go out there and say that the Falcons are going to win Super Bowl. No, but if you look at the Falcons, they're committed to that running game. They stay with it first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. And if you look at their offense, by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, they're wearing you down. The Tennessee Titans over the years under head coach Mike Vrabel have stuck with the running game with, and of course with Derrick Henry, who in my opinion is a future Hall of Famer. It's just that their offense at times can be predictable off of that. But nonetheless, you got to stick with the run game. But getting back to Chubb, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but he's got a long road ahead of him. And hopefully he can come back in the NFL and have some success. And hopefully, he can get back to that level that we've been accustomed to seeing him over the last couple of years. I mean, you're talking about a guy. Um, he was coming off of 300 carries last year, 228 in 2021, and then 298 back in 2019. So he's got some mileage there. But let's just see how he comes back from this, how he rebounds from this, and hopefully Nick Chubb can be the Nick Chubb that we saw before. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'd be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. The original surfer Bob, you're saying simply by Atlanta drafting Robinson, that ignited their team, the fan base, everything. Now they got the juice. I'll tell you like this. Obviously, I don't know how old you are, but I will say, obviously there was a time when, it was pretty common to see running backs, go in round number one. And it's like nowadays, if a running back is taken in round number one, some of the experts, if you will, are taken back from the standpoint that it's just like they're almost surprised by a team, taking a running back in round one as they are if a team took a kicker. But at the end of the day, if somebody has first round talent and if somebody has ability and if somebody can come in there and impact your team, go for it. And I mean, if you watched Bajan Robinson play at Texas, you knew that he was an explosive player. If you watched Nick Chubb play at Georgia, you knew that he was explosive. If you watched Saquon Barkley play, at Penn State, you know that he was explosive. And of the three running backs that I just mentioned, Chubb was the only one who went past the first round. He was taken early on in the second round by Cleveland. Barkley was second overall. And of course, Bajan Robinson was a top 10 pick. But my point is this: if somebody can play, they can play. And, it's too much, paying attention to the draft board as far as saying, well, you don't draft a running back here. If that person is available and you feel that that person can positively impact your team, you go for them. Because I guarantee you, if the Falcons, for an example, had said, "Hey, you know what? John Robinson might be there for us at pick number 25." I guarantee you, he would have been gone by then because somebody else would have traded up and have gotten him. And Bijan Robinson definitely helps this team because you look at it, Atlanta already was a pretty good running team last year without Bijan Robinson. They had the kid out of BYU, Algier, as well as the rookie quarterback last year, Desmond Ritter, who now has another year under his belt. And now you bring in Bijan Robinson. That definitely helps that team. And to your point, it definitely gives this team a spark. And Atlanta, they're going to be in the mix to win this division. Remember, everybody was in the mix to win the NFC South last year. Of course, the Bucks won it at 8-9. Everybody else was 7-10. So, of course, if you're the Falcons, you feel like maybe Bijan Robinson was just that piece that we needed to get over the hump. Obviously, New Orleans has improved. Carolina is rebuilding with a young quarterback with Bryce Young, but nonetheless, the Falcons are a physical team. And if you think about their head coach, Arthur Smith, he came from the Tennessee Titans under Mike Vrabel. And what's one thing that the Tennessee Titans do? They run the football, they stick with it, and they're a very physical team with Derrick Henry. And I think this is something that is transferred over to the Atlanta Falcons. And even though that the Atlanta Falcons probably run the ball more than they pass the ball, they are still an exciting team. They could be, a throwback team, if you will, offensively with their physicality. And that's still a very important part of the NFL game, especially if you want to win, because everybody's not going to go out there and have that Pro Bowl MVP caliber quarterback, and you still need those other pieces to come and play on offense for you. And you're saying of all the running backs I've seen, there's one dude that I've seen linebackers get out of the way, Brandon Jacobs. That dude was bad. I'll tell you like this, because I'm definitely not going to disagree with you on that one. When Brandon Jacobs first came into the NFL, he was an anomaly. And I say that because he started his career at Auburn, transferred to Coffeyville, and he was fresh because you figure Brandon Jacobs didn't have a lot of mileage on him coming into the NFL. And it was hard for him to get on the field at Auburn because you had Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams in front of him, two guys that were first round picks, two guys that were top five picks for that matter. Brandon Jacobs was brought in. He was a backup to Tiki Barber. Of course, Barber was the Giants' feature back at that time. And even then, when you could see Brandon Jacobs spell Tiki Barber, you could see the potential. And the reason was we've seen big backs in the NFL over the years. Your Jim Browns, your Marion Motleys, but even at Eddie George, Eddie George was a bigger running back. But the thing was, a guy like Brandon Jacobs with his size and his speed really was something that that you really don't see that often in the National Football League. We're talking about a guy that was about 6'4", 265, 270, bigger than some defensive ends that were trying to go out there and tackle him. And if you gave him a step and he got that head of steam, you know what, get out of his way. And in his prime, I saw Brandon Jacobs run over some Pro Bowl caliber and even Hall of Fame players. I think back to the NFC Championship game for the Giants when they took on the Green Bay Packers. And Charles Woodson, who was a Defensive Player of the Year, attempted to tackle Brandon Jacobs. He couldn't slow him down. I remember, once when the Giants played the Baltimore Ravens and Ray Lewis attempted to tackle Brandon Jacobs, and he couldn't get the best of him. And Ray Lewis was a sure tackler. In some people's minds, he's arguably the best middle linebacker ever. But nonetheless, that just shows you the impact that Brandon Jacobs had. And like to your point, you know what? He was a freight train. Give him the football and get out of his way. And there's still a mark for that in the National Football League as far as running, needing that guy to set the tone. I think back, and Surfer Bob, you're probably familiar with this and how that Dallas Cowboys offensive line of the 1990s basically just leaned on people and just opened things up for Emmett Smith. Going back a decade before that, the Hogs under Joe Gibbs with the Washington, now then Redskins, now Commanders. It's a scenario where, you know what, that O line was the difference in Washington winning those 3 championships. And you think about the talent that Joe Gibbs put together on that offensive line. Joe Gibbs, I mean, pardon me, Joe Jacoby, Russ Grimm, Mark May, just to name a few. And at the end of the day, you couldn't stop them. And that right there is definitely the factor, that I'm talking about is needing that running game, needing that bell cow guy. And it's unfortunate that in this day and age, a lot of people have like just glossed over the importance of, if you will, of running the ball. You know, it's one of those where you still need to, to run out the clock, whatever like that, win the fourth quarter. You need that guy. And again, like I said, every team doesn't have that quarterback that's going to put him on his respective back to go out there and win. You still got to go out there and have that ability to win. You need that running back to take care of things. And, getting back to the original topic for this, it's one of those where a guy like Nick Chubb, he was that guy for the Cleveland Browns. And it's like I said, it's just unfortunate. Obviously, it's part of the game, but it's just unfortunate that injury had to happen. But nonetheless, like I said, hopefully he can get a speedy recovery. Hopefully he can bounce back for the Browns. And to your point for the Falcons, I think they're going to keep attacking with the running game, and like I said, I like to see more teams around the NFL utilize it. It's a copycat league, so at the end of the day, if we see a team that's able to win the Super Bowl by effectively running the football, I guarantee you more teams are probably going to try to trend in that direction. We just got to wait and see. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And once again, this is William Martin, thanking all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Surfer Bob, it was a pleasure. Definitely appreciate your comments. Please feel free to check back on if you have not subscribed to this podcast. Please feel free to. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those. I'll be back on here tomorrow with my picks for Sunday's action, as well as a double header on Monday night. Getting a couple of double headers so far the early part of the season on Monday night. Go figure. And then I'll definitely be back on here to talk some college football tomorrow. A lot of good games to cover. Got a lot of ranked teams facing off against each other. So with that said, once again, this is William Martin signing off, telling all of you to have a good night. Be safe. And thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.